bunker. We run the tours to this bunker twice a year. Now, before we actually start on the tour, I have to read some safety information. It's very boring, but it's part of our licence to admit the public to the bunker. You've been provided with a hard hat. This must be worn at all times, and it's the condition of you joining the tour that you wear your hat. If you're unwilling to wear a hard hat, then one of my fellow guides will escort you to the surface now. Yeah, I think we all look all right there. Eating, drinking, smoking and sex are not permitted at any time during the tour. So no wandering off into one of the rooms. The floor of the bunker is wet and uneven in places. Please watch where you're walking and take care when using the stairs. Please hold on to the handrail at all times. If you suffer from any medical conditions such as claustrophobia, epilepsy, asthma, high blood pressure and hypoglycemia, or you're prone to fits or fainting, please let one of the guides know before we start the tour. Please don't leave the main tour and wander off on your own. Many of the rooms have debris on the floor and aren't to be entered. Please don't cross any of the hazard tape, and there are no lights on in any of those rooms either. A guide will be at the rear of the party at all times. Throughout the bunker there's extensive mould growth. It's perfectly safe, but we ask that you don't touch any mould or fungus. Please also don't touch any of the stalactites hanging from the ceiling, as these will break off easily. And they look pretty, so we leave them there. There are no rats or nasty things in the bunker. Firefighting equipment is located at entry level and at the end of each corridor on both the two lower levels. In the event of an emergency evacuation, or if we're unable to use the main stairs for some reason, please follow the instructions of the guides who will lead you out via an emergency exit located at the south end of the bunker. Should you feel unwell or decide you don't wish to continue with the tour at any time, please ask one of the guides for assistance. The tour involves using narrow spiral staircases. If anyone is unable to use these stairs or would prefer to use the main stairs between the floors, which is similar to the one you've just come down, then please ask one of our guides for assistance. No small children? I won't bother with that one then. At the end of the tour, please return all wristbands so you can be safely accounted for. The tour will last approximately 50 minutes and there'll be opportunities to ask questions throughout. That's the safety bit out of the way. Let me tell you a little bit about the bunker. At the end of the First World War, it was thought that there might be another attack, another war. And it's thought that there may well be devastating bombing in London and that Whitehall might become unusable. So plans were already being drawn up by the early 20s to provide accommodation for government out of London. There were several schemes. One was to build bunkers in the West Country. Another scheme was to build bunkers in the West Midlands. But the favoured scheme was to move to the northwest suburbs of London. And that's why we're here today. I'll tell you more about the bunker and how it came to be built as we move on, but we need to see some of the rooms, so we're going to move along to this end of the bunker and take a look at some of the air handling plant. Bomb attack, there are two threats. One is from blast. We're underground, so there's going to be no problem with blast. It's not going to affect us down here. But perhaps what could affect someone in the bunker is a gas attack. So the bunker has to be provided with its own supply of fresh, clean, breathable air. That's what this equipment does here. It's part of the air handling plant. Air is sucked in, maybe poisonous air. It's passed through filters and scrubbers. That's a filter there. You can actually see it if you look in the entrance. So it goes through the filters, it's drawn by the fan here, through the filters, into the metal trunking, which you'll see over there, and that runs through into all the rooms in the bunker. So the bunker is provided with a supply of fresh, clean, breathable air. And then it goes out through the exhaust shaft once it's been used. The electrical cabinet there is part of the control equipment for the ventilation plant. All the plant here dates from 1938, when the bunker was built. So everything here is original. Probably doesn't work anymore. A couple of no pumps or compressors here. And we'll move over to the other side and take a little bit more look more. Right, we're going to go down to the main operations level, which is on the lower floor. This is the first of the spiral staircases. Between this level and the next level up, there's 5 feet of solid concrete. Above that, there's a further 4 feet of concrete, and then sand and gravel up to the surface. So 40 feet down here, and at this depth, this bunker was able to survive the largest high explosive bomb that the Germans could deliver. Obviously it would be totally useless in a nuclear war. If this bunker was to take a direct hit from even a small Hiroshima-sized atomic bomb, it would just be a hole in the ground. So no protection at all in the nuclear age. But in the last World War, you'd have been safe here. We had bigger bombs. We had the Tall Boy, which would have penetrated a bunker at this depth with a direct hit. But the Germans didn't have that, so Churchill and the government would have been safe, hopefully, down here. Right, so we're on the lower level. The upper level, as you may have noticed, had rooms on both sides of the road. So the rooms are actually going out under Brook Road. But here, the rooms are all on the west side of the road. And the first room we're going to look at is the main plant room. We'll take a look at the standby generator. So if you follow me into this room, can you all move along right to the back of the room, because it's quite tight here. We were wading in a couple of feet of water. It wasn't always like that, it was always damp. And the water really only came along in the late 1990s, when the housing estate was built on the top. The contractors unfortunately damaged the bunker itself, and there is now a leak. It's up at the top, but the water finds its way down to this level. And the housing went up in the late 90s. We came in about 2001, and already there was a couple of feet of water. It was nasty, it was black. We didn't really know if there were any holes in the floor, any conduits for the wiring. There could have been anything under the floor, so we had to take it very easily down here. In fact, we brought the health and safety people when we were trying to sort out our health and safety certificate to bring the public down, and they wouldn't even come down onto this level. They got sort of down to water level on the stairs, that's as far as they go down. They came back once we pumped it out. So we had the water pumped out. The Housing Association who owned it had the water pumped out. And now we have pumps running to keep the bunker relatively dry. Not completely dry. Each time we have an open day, we have to have contractors in the day before just to get rid of the standing water. They come along actually with a large vacuum cleaner and hoover it up. And then we sweep anything that's left on the floor into the sumps, and that's pumped away. So it gets maybe 2 or 3 inches down here, but it doesn't get any worse than that. The pumps see to that. Right, what are we looking at? A generator. In the event of an attack, normally the bunker would run off the main supply. But if that was cut off following an attack, the bunker had to be totally self-sufficient. So it was provided with a standby diesel generator. Still got the plates on it. Can't read what it says. There's another plate over there. And it should in fact tell you the... it's a Crompton Parkinson. Again, dating from 1938, so this is all original kit. But this would have provided the power had the bunker had lost its power supply. That unit there is the control cabinet for the generator. That unit there at the back of the room is the battery charger. The generator required a battery to start it. And again, we've got more ventilation plants, more fans, another fan up there, another filter unit. So once again, this is ensuring there's a clean, breathable supply of air into the bunker. Right, we're going to take a look at the main reason for the bunker being here, the cabinet war room in Storey's Gate. But it was also a military control centre. So there were two distinct functions. We're going to take a look at the military control centre first, which is in the centre of the lower level. I've seen wartime military control rooms in TV films. They're all fairly similar. You will get a map table quite often with a balcony, people looking down on the map table, and people with sticks pushing little tanks around on the map table. If you've been to the Battle of Britain operations room at RAF Uxbridge, you will have seen a very similar room to that there. Well, this room provides the same function. It is the map room or the military control centre, and this is where the war would have been run from by the military. You'll notice the fluorescent lighting in this room has angled shades. You might think that fluorescent lighting came after the war, maybe in the 50s, but in fact there was fluorescent lighting around in the 30s, and these angled shades were to angle the light onto these walls, which is where all the maps were located. So this room didn't actually have a map table, it had maps on the walls. And you'll notice it's got windows from the adjoining rooms. Window for each of the three services, the Admiralty, the Air Ministry and the Army, so that anyone who wasn't actually required in this room could look into it, could see the maps and could see what was going on. In that door there, if Nick could move out of the way, you'll find it's not a hole in the door, it's not a break in the door, that's deliberate, that's a message hatch. So messages could be passed into the adjacent office from the map room and vice versa. In those days, runners were used on a regular basis to pass messages around from room to room. To speed things up, wherever possible, hatches are provided in the doors, and we'll see a hatch when we go into the cabinet office a little bit later. We'll see a hatch between that room and the adjacent teleprinter room. So this is the military hub of the bunker. It would have been a busy place, there would have been a lot of people in here, it would have been quite noisy, but this is where the war would have been run from, the military side. And we're going to take a look now at the government side, the Cabinet War Room, which is at the far end of Paddock Road, which is in this area. And many people thought, and still think, that's how the bunker got its name, but that's probably not true. The government and the military tended not to name their bunkers after local areas or local buildings or anything like that. There was normally just a book of code names and you'd pick the next one out of the book. So it's probably just pure chance that they picked Paddock and that it happens to relate to something local. But certainly by the 14th of September 1939, it was referred to by that name. Churchill first came here just after the Blitz on the 7th of September 1939. He came here to see how construction of the bunker was getting along. He didn't like it. In fact, in his memoirs, published in the 1950s, he described it as being somewhere near Hampstead and far from the light of day. Those were his words. But there was no reason why in the 1950s he would need to be economical with the truth. The bunker had been long decommissioned, the war was over, and there's absolutely no reason why he shouldn't have been more accurate. It seems more likely he was had no interest in it whatsoever and just remembered it in that way. But we'll take a look now at the room unable to function. If there was an attack, if there was a bombing of Whitehall, then the cabinet war rooms and storage gate would have been used, but that was really only a strengthened basement, so it probably wouldn't have withstood a sustained attack. But having been here early in September, he decided, well, it's been built, so at least we should try it out, see if it's capable of fulfilling its function. There was already a skeleton staff here, ensuring that everything ticked over, everything was ready to go. So on the 3rd of October 1940, Churchill actually chaired a full war cabinet in this room. We know there would have been tables around the room, and Churchill would have sat about there, facing the war cabinet around him. This is another of those message hatches that I told you about before. And we can't go into the adjacent room, but if you look through, you'll see tables along both sides of the room. Unfortunately, if you touch the tables, they fall apart, so we can't actually allow anyone in there anymore. But that was the teleprinter room. The main means of communication during the war was either by telephone or by teleprinter. We don't use them anymore. We've got computers and emails, and we've moved on. But in those days, it was teleprinter. There would have been a lot of teleprinters here, and messages could have been passed into the Cabinet War Office and back to the teleprinter room through that little hatch. Churchill never came back. He described it the following week as totally unsuitable. But he didn't want to be out of London anyway. He wanted to stay in Whitehall. But there was another Cabinet meeting held in this room. It was in October, I think I said it was 1939. 3rd of October 1940 was the first War Cabinet meeting. The second one was in March 1941. Churchill wasn't in the country on that date, so the Cabinet meeting was chaired by the Lord Privy Seal, Clement Attlee. It's thought that the main reason for coming back here, again, it wasn't required, there hadn't been a devastating attack, but the Australian Premier Robert Menzies was in the country, and it was always, he always liked to address the War Cabinet regarding the Australian and the New Zealand war effort. So it was decided to bring him down here to show him the kind of protected facilities that we had available. And he addressed the War Cabinet in this room for 40 minutes, and I'm sure he was quite impressed by the facilities we had available for the government. So Clement Attlee chaired the meeting, and we had the privilege of welcoming his grandson, the present Lord Attlee, to the bunker about 4 years ago. We picked him up at the House of Lords, brought him here, and he spent a couple of hours down here, very interested in the bunker and his family history and his family's involvement with this bunker. So it was a privilege to show him around the bunker. Again, you'll notice angle shades, so there would have been maps on this wall as well, another angle shade there. The electrical boxes probably came later. Right, we'll take a look at a very small room just out in the lobby here and see if anyone can tell me what they think might have gone on here.
Look through the house. Is it lit in there? Yeah.
This room has actually deteriorated. Blast door frames. Sadly, the door has gone. But there is a very similar bunker to this on the corner of Edgware Road and Oxgate Road in Cricklewood, because this was one of 3 similar bunkers. In fact, there were originally going to be 4. There was going to be one for the government and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which is this one. There's going to be one for the Admiralty, there's one for the Air Ministry, and one for the Army. The Air Ministry one, which had the codename Station Z, was at Harrow. In fact, it's on land now owned by Kodak. That was a 2-level bunker, similar to this one. That's still there. It's been completely stripped out. Up until a few years ago, it was flooded, but they pump the water out now. But visits aren't allowed there. They did allow us in once. The Admiralty one had the codename Oxgate. And that was under what used to be the Admiralty Chart Store in the Edgware Road, which itself was only demolished a few years ago. But they built a brand new 2-level bunker with a 3-level office block on top of it, which is now carpet warehouses. And in fact, they're using, the various carpet companies are using the upper floor of the bunker as a storeroom for carpets. The lower floor again, when we first went there, it was flooded almost up to the top of the spiral staircase, and they ignored that, and the next minute they noticed it had actually overflowed onto their level. So it had come right up the stairs, so they had the whole thing pumped out. Now they keep it pumped out. It's a total mess down there, but these blast doors the same as this, are still in place on that one. The army bunker, well, they lost out because they never got a bunker. It was meant to be at Nella Hall in Twickenham, which is the Army School of Music, and in fact they ended up only got a surface building there. I suppose it was quite a bit further out of London, and they decided that they didn't actually need to be underground. So I feel they lost out, they didn't get a bunker, they got a building. Right, we're going to go into another vital here. Very important bit of kit, absolutely vital. What is it?
Wine store. Looks like a wine rack.
No, you will fall into the trap as well.
Very similar to the computer they got at Bexley Park.
That's close to a wine rack. No, you're all falling into the trap. It's not a wine rack. Say again? Very close. The kit is called a main distribution frame. It is basically a switching unit for telephones, a telephone exchange. So all the lines come in through that hole in the wall, on those hangers there, the telephone cables, and they come into this unit here. If we come round to the other side of it, there's some evidence. These are relays, which are electrical switches. So they're switching the lines from room to room. For example, we've got 100 PRS, 100 pairs to the main distribution frame in the sub-basement. So that's 100 pairs of cables going down to a smaller version of this downstairs. What's very interesting, again, we've got 100 pairs to the main distribution frame in the sub-basement, another 54 pairs in that one. The cables, the phone lines for the cabinet wardroom downstairs. So a vital piece of equipment, the main means of communication in and out of the bunker, I've said before, telephone and teleprinter. So this room is where all that happened. We don't know exactly what else might have been in this room. The suspended ceiling is clearly later. Now, doesn't he look like a barman through there? Certainly in the 1950s, after the bunker had been decommissioned, the post office was still on site because this was their site before the bunker was built. It was built on the site of the post office research station, which was built in the 1920s. And when the bunker was decommissioned, the post office moved into this, and they used a lot of the rooms, particularly on the upper floor. We know they had some social activities up here. We know there was a photographic dart room. It was table tennis. It has been suggested that this room became a social club. It certainly looks like a social club. False ceiling, you can imagine a nice carpet on the floor, some comfy armchairs, and a friendly man serving you with a pint of warm Red Barrel. If any of you are old enough to remember that, wasn't it? Don't we miss it? Obviously not. More than likely, though, it was a recording studio, and there was a glass panel there, and the engineer was sitting the other side, and whatever was being recorded was in here. But really, it's only speculation. Now, you haven't done very well at guessing what things are, so we'll give you another chance here. It is a sink at the back.
I'll go for decontamination.
No. I don't think anyone's going to guess. This is the battery room. Telephone equipment, exchange equipment, doesn't run off the mains, it runs off batteries. There would have been lead acid batteries, similar to in your car. If they spill over, it would damage the shack pile, to be honest. So you have a tiled floor. These are Darlington tiles. And the sink at the back of the room, they would have had water in there, they could mop up the sulfuric acid on the floor. Whenever you see a tiled room in a bunker, you can always guarantee it's a battery room. So you would have had two racks of batteries here, one that was on, and the others, they could be on charge. So there'd be a couple of battery chargers and batteries in this room. Right, this doorway here is later. This was knocked through probably in the 1950s. And we'll move into this room. Notice we had someone who actually worked in this room in the war. We've had quite a lot of people who've come back who came into the bunker, who worked in the bunker in the 1950s and in the 1960s. But we're really interested in the people who were here in the war. And there was one elderly lady, she was obviously young when she was working down here, and she remembered this is where she worked, this was her room. And she used to come in, walk down the stairs, along the corridor, into this room. Hadn't a clue what went on in any of the other rooms, because that was the way. You only knew your own business, and you certainly didn't ask. She started asking, she'd been out of a job very quickly. But we know this was the switchboard room. And this was, all the telephone switchboards were in this room, and she was a telephone operator, and that was her job in this room. So we know this was the switchboard room. I doubt if they'd have eaten that. As I said, this was the post office research station. The bunker was built on an existing government site. It was built mainly at night, under camouflage netting. So nobody was really aware of what was going on. In fact, George VI was only informed of what was going on here after work was well underway, because he didn't really need to know. So if you didn't need to know, you didn't know. And certainly, everyone who lived here hadn't a clue what was going on in this site. They knew it was the post office site, and that important government work went on here, but they didn't know exactly what. So the bunker was built at night, under camouflage netting. The spoil was carried away in lorries at night, so nobody knew what was happening here. Originally, it was meant to be a 3-storey building on the surface above a 2-storey bunker. That's not, in fact, how it was built. It ended up as a single-storey building on the surface. We'll see a picture of it in a minute, with a 2-level bunker under it. So it was really a 3-level structure. Anyone who was down here would have shared the post office canteen. Had the bunker been, or had the site been attacked, had the bunker needed to be sealed down, then they obviously needed some sort of facilities down here, so you had a very basic kitchen, and food would have been served through that serving hatch, food and drinks. No sleeping down here, no accommodation at all. That was provided for Churchill and for the important government officials in Neville's Court, which is on the corner of Brook Road and Dollis Hill Lane. That had only recently been built just before the war, and the whole block was commandeered. 2 of the flats were knocked into one for Churchill. It's doubtful if he ever went there. And other less important people were billeted in local schools. So for Churchill it would have been a 200 or 300 yard walk to his sleeping accommodation, or probably someone would have driven him. Although there might have been sort of, for him he might have had some kind of bunk bed down here, but certainly there was no dormitory accommodation. Also there were no toilets, which is unfortunate if you're sealed in a bunker for several days. They might have brought the odd Elson down, or otherwise you had the fire bucket. So it really wasn't going to be a comfortable place in a lockdown situation. So this is the kitchen, and we're nearing the end of our story.